Hello, my name is Charles Sabo and I'm here for another teaching video. Today I'm going to be going into Isaiah chapter 4 of the Bible commentary I wrote that was published in January of this year. I wrote it through all of 2019 and all of 2018 and half of 2019, I'm sorry. And so it was published in 2020. I did teaching videos on the introduction in chapter 1, 2, and then 3. So this is the fourth video, which is on chapter 4. You can see the PDF file of the manuscript for the book in front of you, and that's where I'll be teaching from. If you have any questions, I know many people do have questions, but they're afraid to ask. Please don't be afraid to ask. I'll be glad to tell you or show you or teach you. And as well as if you like the video, please hit like down below or subscribe to my channel so you can be notified when each chapter comes out. So I'm going to go right into verse 1 of chapter 4, and we'll start from there. All right. And in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel, only let us be called by the name to take away our reproach. So you can see that chapter 4 begins with the word "and," which means it's in addition to what was stated in the last verse. So I'm going to go back and I'll start in verse 25 of chapter 3 and just real quickly just read the verses. All right, and I might explain slightly what's going on here. This is prophecy of the Babylonian captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. And so Isaiah's providing information about the captivity. He said, your men shall fall by the sword and your mighty in war, right? Okay? And then in verse 26, and her gates shall lament and mourn, and she being desolate shall sit upon the ground. Now I'll read this right here, paragraph. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to solemn feasts, and her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh, her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. And that's Lamentations 1:4. That's when Jeremiah is seeing the captivity happen. So he's writing on it. So this is history being spoken of by Jeremiah in Lamentations. Jeremiah's poetic history book of the aftermath of the destruction of Jerusalem confirms what Isaiah prophesied 130 to 142 years earlier. The daughters of Zion will lament while sitting on the ground after she watched her men slaughtered and her possessions burned. Elder daughters of Zion will have witnessed their sons brutalized and murdered at the hands of her captors. All right, that's Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian army. All right, so here we go. So I read this verse, so I'm just going to go into the explanation of this verse now. And in the day the 7 women shall take hold of one man. Okay, this is a continuation from Isaiah 3:26 because of the word "and." The expression "in that day" refers to the time that the daughters of Zion, God's people, Israel, the daughters of Zion. Zion was God's people. The daughters of God's people is who we're talking about here, would be losing their men mentioned in 3:25. Remember I read 3:25. Men will be scarce among those women left alive after relying their entire lives on being provided for by their corrupt fathers and husbands. These women needed to find a man to marry so to not be a cultural or social misfit, old maid. God commanded Adam and Eve, then Noah and his 3 sons and wives, to go forth and replenish the earth. That's per Genesis 1:28 and Genesis 9:7. The kingdom of God can continue to grow if marriages and babies continue. A woman's life responsibility was to get married and have babies. That's contrary to what today's women think. They think that going and being successful in business and heck with having kids and getting married, they think that that is what they're intended for. Hogwash. If they did not, it was considered to be a disobedience to God's command. The reproach spoken of here is that they would have failed as a woman and human being if they did not marry and have children. All right, that's in Israel. I read you Genesis 30 verse 23. And she conceived and bare a son and said, God had taken away my reproach. Okay, and I believe this was Rachel after she got pregnant with Joseph. All right. Only let us be called by the name, by your name, the man that she's taken, that the 8 women are taken as their husband, to take away our reproach. Our. Notice it didn't say my, our. The 8 women, their reproach. They want a man to take away their reproach. All right. Verse 2. In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent and comely for them that are escaped of Israel. All right. In that day refers to the time of captivity of Jerusalem. The branch of the Lord should be looked upon to be the Messianic bloodline promised to go through the tribe of Judah and the bloodline of David. The remnant that would escape death during the 70 years of captivity would be beautiful and glorious, as God would prosper them with fruits of the earth. The stay and the staff would return to bless the returning remnant coming out of the captivity. Now, if you read chapter 3 or watch my chapter 3 video, verse 1 of chapter 3 talks about God taking away the stay and the staff to punish them. Now he's bringing it back for the returning remnant. This prophecy was provided by God to assure those about to go into captivity that he had not forgotten about his promises to mankind through Genesis 3:15, the promise of the Messiah, to Abraham, Jacob, and King David. He made promises to all of them. All right, and Abraham. I said Abraham, sorry. Verse 3. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion, God's kingdom, and he that remains in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even every one that is written among the living in Jerusalem. The word and means in addition to the previous verse. The expression it shall come to pass means that eventually the following promise will be fulfilled. The great hope for those going into captivity was that a remnant of Israel would remain living in Jerusalem and would be called holy. One can know that it has not yet happened and certainly will not come into fulfillment until the millennial kingdom of Christ. This is not the eternal kingdom, eternity, because of what is written within the following verses. This does not mean that the prophecy is only for the nation Israel. This includes all of God's children, including Gentile believers. These promises coming up here for the millennial kingdom. Verse 4. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, the filth, the corruption, the idolatry, the daughters of Zion. Zion is God's kingdom. The daughters are the daughters of those people. That doesn't mean that they're believers. And shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. Because there is a semicolon ending verse 3 and verse 4, following is not a complete sentence. Verse 4 following is not a complete sentence. Okay. And you can see that it's not when the Lord shall have washed. I mean, it's an explanation of the previous verse. The Lord, and the semicolon isn't even appropriate. It should have been a comma. The Lord will purge the unrighteousness from Israel and the blood that will be shed there by his judgments with fire. All right, now I'm going to read you Zechariah 13:9 because it talks about the same situation. All right, the second coming of Christ. He purges them with fire. He brings them through the fire. It's a spiritual matter where they're coming through the 7 years, being brought through the fire of God's wrath. They have to live through it. And that is not the church. The church is not going to be on the ground there at that time. The church will be in heaven. This is Israel, the ones that didn't get raptured, are remaining on earth for that full 7 years. If the 70th week of Daniel begins on this Feast of Atonement, Tishri 10 coming up, then for 7 years, Israel that's left will go through this. And let's just say there's 9 million Jews on the planet right now. Let's just say. I'm going to read this. And 1/3, I will bring 1/3 through the fire. So 1/3 is 3 million. And will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. Then they will call on my name, and I will hear them. And I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. All right, and I wrote a commentary on the book of Revelation of Jesus Christ, which I explain a little bit more detail about that remnant that's here, that's being protected for the last part, the last 3.5 years. All right. So if you are interested more in that, you can look at the teaching videos I have on YouTube or buy the book. 2/3 of the nation of Israel will be destroyed with fire during the 70th week of Daniel, while 1/3 will be refined into true believers as Jesus Christ, of believers of Jesus Christ. They will see him at his second coming and will mourn for him when they realize that he is the Holy One of Israel, as Isaiah calls him. All right, now, Zechariah 12:10. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, Jesus. They pierced him in the side when he was on the cross, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one is bitterness for his firstborn. That's the great mourning that Israel is going to feel when they see Christ. All right, that 1/3 remnant mentioned in Zechariah 13:9. All right, verse 5. And the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion upon her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day, and the shining of the flaming fire by night. For upon all the glory shall be a defense. There is night and day, which reveals that this is not the eternal kingdom, right? During the millennial kingdom of Christ, his glory and presence will be seen, just as God's presence was seen during the Exodus. It's still a fallen world, so night and day is happening, right? Exodus 13:21, by the way. So shall the Lord's presence be seen from Jerusalem for the 1,000 years. But what is being described here? The Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day, and the shining of a flaming fire by night. So we're talking about, if you read Zechariah 14, it talks about how the place in Jerusalem will be flattened, and then there's going to be a place where the temple will be sitting on, it will be raised up. The Mount Zion will be raised up during the millennial kingdom, and there will be a cloud of smoke by day and a shining of flaming fire by night for 1,000 years over that raised up place in Jerusalem. All right, I did a teaching video on Zechariah. Chapter 14 is there if you want to go and see what I'm talking about the raised up place in Jerusalem for that 1,000 years. It's there in Zechariah 14. Verse 6. And there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert from storm and from rain. Now, many want to spiritualize this passage, but I do not see it that way. Verse 5 already speaks of the Lord's glory being his defense for the inhabitants of the city. I believe that the Lord has plans for the city to have a tabernacle. Translated from the Hebrew word kukah, it's a pavilion or covert over Jerusalem, which will protect the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the weather during the millennial kingdom. In Daniel 12:11, the Lord reveals that it would be 1,290 days from the time of the abomination of desolation to the point 30 days after the Lord arrives. 1,260 days is 1,260 days after the abomination of desolation, right? Yeah, the midpoint, the abomination of desolation, 1,260 days later, Christ comes. 30 days to set up the kingdom. This will be the 30 days needed to prepare for the millennial kingdom. This pavilion over Jerusalem could be this plan of preparation. Millions of people will be coming to Jerusalem each year to worship the Lord during the Feast of Tabernacles. That's in Zechariah 14:16. If it were to be unreasonably hot, windy, or wet, this pavilion-like covering will protect the millions from suffering the weather conditions. All right, and that's what this is. And there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge for the covert from the storm of rain. This is an eternity, because eternity there's no more fall, and I mean, it's going to be perfect conditions, and we won't have to worry about being hot and cold and wet and what have you. This is the millennial kingdom, okay? And I believe that's the end of the chapter. So chapter 4 is only 6 verses. But what an amazing prophecy here of 4 and 5, verse 4 and 5, talking about the millennial kingdom, all right, and how over the throne, over the temple on that mount that's raised up as per Zechariah 14 is going to be a cloud and smoke by day, and a shining a flaming fire by night. Just like in the Exodus, the whirlwind or what have you, as they were traveling, where they were following it. Well, the Lord is there this time too, and the same thing there with him. All right. So if you read Exodus 13, you'll read of this cloud of smoke by day and shining a flaming fire by night. Well, during the millennial kingdom, it's still going to be there. It's going to be there over Jerusalem, over that raised up land section mentioned in Zechariah 14. All right, and if you, I strongly advise you to see the video I made on Zechariah 14 so you get an idea of what verses we're talking about. And then obviously the tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat. What an amazing thing. Oh, that's not possible. What? We're talking God here. Everything's possible with God. And so this tabernacle over the entire city of Jerusalem is going to happen. If you believe in your salvation, you need to believe in this. Okay? Anyway, short chapter, interesting chapter. Hopefully you learned something from it. I know when I went through and wrote on this, I was amazed by what I found here. And hopefully you haven't realized this, that you're finding it here now too. Anyway, that's it. So the next chapter will be chapter 5. Thank you for joining me today. Please hit like down below, subscribe to my channel, or ask questions. I'm here to answer them. That's what I do. I teach. Anyway, God bless you. May the Lord be a part of your life. May you do his will. Preach the gospel during these hard times. Obviously, the social distancing we have going on right now is an abomination. We need to somehow find a way to show God's gospel to the lost, even during this virus that's causing us to have to do our masks and social distancing. Anyway, God bless you and have a great rest of the day.